and its impact on our election system. My name is Eleanor Latimer. I'm a member of Reform Elections Now, a nonpartisan group of business and legal people who came together after reading The Politics Industry by Catherine Gell and Harvard Emeritus Professor Michael Porter. They came together to research and understand how our election system has broken down and what can be done to reduce the polarization and increase bipartisanship by helping to change the way our elections are run and financed. Just to let you know, we're a 501c3, but we do not fundraise or ask for donations. Today, Peter Cyrus, the chairman and director of research at Reform Elections Now, and a graduate of the Harvard Business School, is presenting his findings on gerrymandering. I think you're going to find it very, very interesting. This presentation will last approximately 45 minutes. Please put your questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them after Peter finishes his presentation. Peter, it's all yours.
Thanks. Well, sorry, I went to the wrong slide. So I'm going to start on the, wait a second, I'm going to go back. There's the first slide. Thank you. Okay. So gerrymandering is as old as the Republic. Gerrymandering is a drawing of political boundaries to specifically favor the dominant party and marginalize everything else. That was named after Elbridge Gerry, governor of Massachusetts and fifth vice president, who drew his district near Boston to look like a salamander, and that's where we get the word gerrymander. But even before Elbridge Gerry, there were famous instances of gerrymandering. My favorite is when Patrick Henry, the give me liberty or give me death guy, created a gerrymander to keep James Madison, who wanted to add the Bill of Rights to the Constitution, out of Congress. What Henry did was he created a district of anti-federalists in which he placed Madison's home, and then he recruited James Monroe to run against Madison. Now, fortunately for the Bill of Rights, Madison won by 336 votes, but this was the only election in which two future presidents ran against each other. Okay, now we got to figure out how to change the page. Yes. So we think that gerrymandering is the lethal weapon of 2025. Look, people live with like-minded people, which is why we have so few competitive elections. But gerrymandering makes it worse. It's the drawing of political boundaries to marginalize everybody but the dominant party. Now, historically, states have drawn congressional legislative districts every 10 years after the census, reallocating seats based on changes in population. But this year, Republican states, prodded by President Trump, are conducting or threatening to conduct mid-cycle redistricting to gain more seats in the next Congress. Some states that currently have independent commissions may switch back to allowing legislators to draw districts, so they too can gerrymander. If these efforts succeed, we could be entering a period where politicians from the dominant party in each state redistrict after each election to maximize their representation and minimize that of their opponents. This could lead to a world in which competitive elections virtually disappear. Now, let's look at one person, one vote, which is theoretically the system we have. But if we look at, in 2018, at Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, in each of these states, Democrats won the popular vote by good margins. In Pennsylvania, they won 53 to 44, basically, yet Republicans won 17 more seats. In North Carolina and Michigan, same thing. Democrats won the popular vote by healthy margins, but got a minority of the seats. Gerrymandering enabled Republicans to control legislatures with a minority of the vote. Now, my favorite is Wisconsin. I apologize to any Wisconsin people on the call. In 2018 state assembly elections, Democrats won the popular vote 53 to 44.8. That's a big, big victory. Should have given them a comfortable majority. Instead, Republicans won 63 seats while Democrats won only 36. How they do it? Republicans packed Democrats into a small number of districts. In 36 wins, the Democrats faced competition in only six, and one of those was a landslide. The Democrats' average margin of victory was 90%. The Republicans' margin of victory was 28%. Hey, ain't real tough if you win by 28% and the other party wins by 90% to get almost two-thirds of the seats with a minority of the votes. Now, what they did in Wisconsin is called cracking and packing. Packing is the art of putting all members of one party into one district. Cracking is the art of splitting them apart to minimize their representation. I just want you to look at the chart for a second. What the Republicans did is they cracked the city of Milwaukee into pieces. The Democratic residents were cracked into districts 13, 14, 15, 20, 22, 23, 24, 82, 83, and 84. And the Republicans won 9 of these districts. So basically, by taking the Democrats in Milwaukee and cracking them apart, the Republicans ignored the districting rules of maintaining county and other political subdivisions that are supposed to apply to drawing districts. Now, in 2020 in Texas, the average margin of victory was 27.4 percentage points. So just if it was if it was 60-40, that's only 20 percentage points. So in other words, these are pretty broad elections. Out of 36 districts, 4 had margins under 5 percentage points, 10 under 10, and 15 of the 36 under 15 percentage points. So there were some competitive elections. But that was not good enough for the Republicans, who worried about the Democrats gaining ground. So after the census, when Texas gained 2 seats, Republicans went to town. The margins jumped from 27.4 to 43.6. And the competitive elections dropped from 15 to 3, with 6 elections with no competition. With gerrymandering, Republicans in Texas made the elections completely uncompetitive. Now, here are some pictures of districts in Texas. I'll give you you can guess which of these are Democratic and which are Republican. The hint is Republicans are all the ones where they look packed together, and Democrats are all the ones where they look like they're, somebody was stoned when they drew those districts. Now, one of the interesting things about gerrymandering is it really hits turnout. In 2018, turnout in Texas was 53%. In 2022, after redistricting, it was 45.8. That's a decline of 13.5%. Now, with all this gerrymandering, you might have thought Republicans would be satisfied. But President Trump was not. He urged Texas Governor Abbott to redistrict again and take a, quote, ruthless approach so Republicans could gain more seats. As a result, Abbott called a special session of the legislature to redraw the maps. Now, if you go back to slide 7, you will see there were only 2 competitive elections in 2024, districts 28 and 34. Both were won by Democrats. It would be logical to presume the Republicans would redraw these districts by shifting Republicans to pick up these 2 seats. Obtaining the other 3 is going to take some real creativity. But we're going to see what Texas is doing. You may be surprised. Now, just so you don't think I'm only picking on Republicans, Republicans control more states, and some Democratic states use independent commissions. But the Democrats are really good at gerrymandering too. In Illinois, Democrats wanted to create seats for their African American, Latino, and white constituents while minimizing Republican seats. So first, let's look at these. These are the 6 districts around Chicago. I love the one on the left, which is called the Earmuff District, represented by Chuy Garcia. But as you see, each of these districts, they snipped out all the neighborhoods so the Hispanics could have Hispanic voters, blacks could have black, African Americans could have black vote, African American voters, whites could have white voters. But where they really shined, and I admire them, is this is what they did downstate. The Democrats had 57% of the vote in 2022 and 52.8 in 2024. They should have lost seats. But with their superior map drawing skills, they went from 13.5 to 14.3 in Congress because they crammed all the Republicans together. And if you look at the Democratic seats are on the left and the Republican seats are on the right, and you see they like hollowed out little wedges for the Republican seats, where they found the Democrats in like college towns and stuff like that. Now, another of the gerrymandering terms is called hijacking. Hijacking is a term for forcing incumbents to run against each other. And this happened to Adam Kinzinger in 2 consecutive election cycles. In 2010, Kinzinger defeated a Democratic incumbent in District 11. Then in 2012, Republicans got rid of his seat. He had a choice running against Jesse Jackson Jr. in a strong Democratic district. That was before Jesse Jackson Jr. went to jail, or against the conservative Republicans. He ran against the conservative Republican and won. In 2020, Kinzinger became the first Republican to support the impeachment of Donald Trump and joined the January 6th commission. Republicans threw him out of their congressional caucus. What did the Democrats do to thank him for his stance against Trump? They gerrymandered him out of his district again. Kinzinger said, 10 years ago, the Democrats in Illinois threw me in with an incumbent Republican, and then they did it again. But when the Democrats say they want Republican partners, and then they specifically target me, makes you wonder. So here's a moderate congressman who stood up for moral issues. The Republicans censored him, and the Democrats hijacked him into retirement. Now, North Carolina is really the best example of the games that the states can play with gerrymandering. If you look at the first column in 2020, those were the districts in North Carolina. The average margin was 29.6%. In 2022, North Carolina adopted a nonpartisan system. The margins dropped to 20.7%. 2023, the courts threw out the nonpartisan system. North Carolina went back to politically drawn system. The margins went back to 30%. In 2022, 4 of the congressional districts had margins under 10%. And the other 2 elections, 2 and 1. So these margins, not only do they benefit one party at the expense of the other, they get rid of competitive elections. Now, I want to show you what geniuses the Republicans in North Carolina were at drawing maps. In 2010, the Democrats won 7 congressional seats to 6 for the Republicans. In 2012, Republicans redistricted. The Democrats won the popular vote 50.6 to 48.75. But Republicans won 9 out of the 13 seats. Now, how do you win twice the number of seats with less votes? You do it with your map drawing skills. Now, look at how these Democratic districts like sneak through. My favorite quote from one Democrat said of gerrymandering the 12th district, which is the little one that goes all the way down on the left. If you drove down the interstate with the doors open, you'd kill half the people in the districts. So the Republicans looked for every Democrat, shoved them into a small number of districts, and won 9 seats out of 13 with a minority of the vote. Now you get gerrymandering in Georgia, another state, supposedly a swing state. Look at what gerrymandering has done. In the Georgia State Senate election, there was no competition in 33 of the 55 districts, excluding one district where the incumbent died. The average margins were 71.9 percentage points. Now, just let me explain. 90 and 10, that's 80 percentage points. So it's like somebody got 71 percentage points is like somebody got 85 and 15, that kind of number. Only one election had margins under 10%. Incumbents ran in 51 districts of the 55, all were reelected. So this is what these kind of districts do. And, just a comment on the Georgia congressional districts. In Georgia, 3 members of the Georgia delegation rank in the bottom 21 in terms of bipartisanship. None rank in the top 26, in the top 60. If these districts are more balanced, minorities and whites could work better together and find more moderate representation. Now, districting is supposed to, as I said earlier, respect county and other political subdivisions. But in Utah, the Republicans said no go. In 2018, Utah voters passed a proposition, a constitutional amendment, calling for an independent commission to draw districts. But since it didn't suit their needs, the state legislatures removed the law's prohibition on partisan gerrymandering, and then they went after Utah number 4, centered in Salt Lake. And what this district, the Democrats had won this district twice from 2012 to 2020. The Republicans said, hey, we don't want no Democrats here. So they took Salt Lake and divided it into 4 pieces. So they got rid of the Democrats. Unfortunately for the Republicans, on August 25th, which was like 2 weeks ago, the courts in Utah ruled that gerrymandering is illegal, so they have to redraw these districts. But the same patterns occurred in Tennessee and Oregon. And Tennessee had 2 Democratic congressmen, one from Nashville, one from Memphis. So the Republicans decided, hey, let's get rid of Nashville. So they divided Nashville into 3 other districts, and they reduced the number of Democratic seats from 2 to 1. But just again, in Oregon, to protect the suburban vote, the Democrats split Portland and its suburbs into 4 districts so they would all stay Democratic. Now, this is one of my favorite maps. This is New York City. And as you can see, every group has its own district. If you look, you can see 7, 13, 14, and 15 have Latino congresspersons. And Latinos are the largest ethnic group in 3 of the 4, and they're tied for the largest in the 4th. Number 6, that's an Asian congressperson. You got a majority of Asian votes. Number 11 has a white Republican. Number 5, 8, and 9 are black. Number 10 and 12 are white and Democratic, so they have white congresspeople. Now, remember, I said in redistricting, you're supposed to maintain county jurisdictions. You're not supposed to be drawing these things overlapping counties. But in New York, 11, 12, 14, 3, and 16 all overlap counties. So, for example, if you look at 14, 14 is AOC, and she's got some of the Hispanics in Queens, some of the Hispanics in the Bronx. She almost has people in Westchester. Now, also, gerrymandering gets rid of people who don't toe the party line. Look what happened to moderate Republicans who voted to impeach Trump in 2022. In Ohio, the chairman of the Republican Party said Anthony Gonzalez, who had voted to impeach Trump, was betrayed his constituents. He got gerrymandered into another district. He had no chance of winning. In New York, John Katko, same story, gerrymandered into another district. In Illinois, I already mentioned Kinzinger. In Michigan, Fred Upton gerrymandered into another district. He retired. Now, Katko, Gonzalez, Kissinger, and Upton ranked number 3, 14, 34, and 36, most bipartisan members of Congress. And yet both parties decided those were the kind of people we didn't want in our government. Now, this is one of my favorites. Gerrymandering can also be used to protect incumbents from up and coming members of their own party. In 2000, a young candidate ran against a long-term incumbent in New York's 57th Assembly District. The young candidate received 41% of the vote. He was running again in 2002 and had a good chance of winning. In the middle of the campaign, the Democrats decided they didn't want him to run. So they moved 9 houses, including his, into another district, and he couldn't run. Whatever happened to him? What was his name? Hakeem Jeffries. Democrats gerrymandered Hakeem Jeffries out of running. In response to the gerrymander, Jeffries stated, politics can be pretty rough, but that move was gangsta. Now, sometimes gerrymandering can help. Also in 2000, another young Democrat decided to gerrymander himself. The state senator was trounced by incumbent Congressman Bobby Rush in 2000. So he decided he needed a different election district that could help him build this constituency. He wanted a district that was wealthier so he could attract donors, whiter and more moderate so it could run as a middle-of-the-road politician. His home wasn't far from the border of the next district, so he worked to have a few blocks of houses, including his own, moved to the adjoining district. Bobby Rush was reelected for the next 20 years, but the young state senator was able to build something of a career for himself. His name was Barack Obama. And if you look at the chart, you'll see on the top was Barack's first district. And if you look on the bottom, his new district along the lake, where he got richer and better constituents. Now, this is my absolute favorite, so please stick with me. You got to believe you can't make this up. You see this hot-looking chick here? Her name is Janelle Heyer Spencer. She was a motorcycle riding former beauty queen and lawyer who was a New York State Democratic Assemblyman from Staten Island until she was defeated in 2011. She then obtained a job with the New York State Department of Education. Heyer Spencer was rumored to be having an affair with Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver. She was also rumored to be having an affair with Republican Minority Whip Dan Burley. When it came time for redistricting, Silver called his caucus together and decided his party's top redistricting goal should be to get his rival, Dan Burling, out of office because, as he was rumored to have said, I don't like sharing my mistress with an effing Republican. So he engineered the drawings of new lines around Burling's district, so Burling had to retire, and then he had his mistress all to himself. Unfortunately, Silver was later convicted of federal corruption charges and sent to Otisville prison. I have no idea how this impacted his sex life, but Question is, should we be drawing districts to keep a rival away from someone's mistress rather than suit the interests of the voters? And one more subject, believe it or not, this I call bespoke gerrymandering. There was a guy named Michael Berman. He was a brother of a congressman. Now, before California went to a commission system, he would create bespoke districts for every one of his customers. If they were African American, he gave them African American neighborhoods. Jews got Jewish neighborhoods, etc. In 2000, Democrats paid Berman $1.3 million, and 30 Congress people paid him an additional $20,000 each to design custom districts, which they all would win, which they did. As Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, who ran for Senate against Kamala Harris, stated, 20,000 is nothing to keep your seat. If my colleagues are smart, they'll pay. Those who refuse to pay, God help them. I mean, nothing makes a congressperson look better than their own bespoke district. Just a suggestion, if California eliminates commissions that currently draw districts, there may be a new business opportunity for somebody who can draw bespoke districts. Now, let's just take a quick look at how states draw districts. In 34 states, state legislatures draw the district. This means that politicians are drawing their own district. This is like letting kids pick their own grades or workers their own salaries. In 14 states, commissions draw districts. 2 states have hybrid systems. As I mentioned, state requirements are every district has to have the same number of votes. The districts have to be compact, contiguous, preserve counties and other political boundaries, preserve communities of interest, cores of prior districts, and avoid pairing incumbents against each other. Now, we've already seen lots of cases where that hasn't happened. Now, this is the picture of how the states do it. The states in blue have commissions. The states in green have hybrid systems. The states in gray have only one congressional district, so we won't worry about them. And the states in orange or yellow, whatever color you want to call it, they have the politicians drawing districts. Now let's look at what the difference between independent commissions and gerrymandering do. You'll see on the left, Colorado and Arizona. The average margin in the election, Colorado 19.4, Arizona 17.6. Compare that with Indiana and Maryland, 29.3 and 37. Now, of the 17, both of these groups have 17. Of the 17 elections in Arizona and Colorado, 11 were competitive. Of the 17 elections in Indiana and Maryland, 2 were competitive. There is a gigantic difference between having 11 out of 17 or 2 out of 17 competitive. Now, independent commissions also advance bipartisanship. Well, we went through the Lugar Center bipartisan ratings for the last Congress. On the left, you see states, 5 states with legislative drawn systems. On the right, you see 5 states with commission drawn systems. Now, here's what's interesting. The 5 states with legislative drawn systems average a bipartisan ranking of 283. 1 is good, and the highest number is 436. As opposed to commission states, which are 190. That's a very, very substantial difference. For example, Maryland has 5 of the 100 least bipartisan members of Congress and only 1 of the 100 most bipartisan. Now, other states have some similar patterns. The same chart we looked at on the other side. Michigan and New Jersey have bipartisan commissions. The margins are 22.9 and 19.3. Tennessee and Illinois have districts drawn by politicians, 38.7, 38.1. That's a gigantic difference. Now, the solution to gerrymandering is very simple. States should pass laws enacting independent commissions to draw election districts. We don't like children pick their grades or workers pick their salary. Why should we let politicians draw their own districts? With independent commissions, there are more competitive elections, more competition, more moderates, far more bipartisanship, and fewer political games. And turnout is much higher. In 2022, 7 states had turnout over 50%. 3 of these used independent commissions. One used ranked choice voting. 6 states had less than 40% turnout. All of these were heavily gerrymandered states. Now, among the most aggressive gerrymandering is the drawing of election districts related to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This may be a third rail, but I have to mention it. There are currently 144 minority members in Congress compared to 63 just 24 years ago. Voting rights has helped increase minority representation. There are now 67 majority minority districts. These are districts where a specific minority makes up more than 50% of the voters. So there is a reasonable question, however, whether there's a typo here. The first one should say 26 African American. Sorry. Um, the There is a reasonable question as to whether majority minority districts impact polarization. Because by packing all the minorities into one district, voters elect minority representatives, but the other districts have few minorities, and their representatives have no incentives to consider minority issues. Now, let's just look at a simple number here. This little table, the average percentage point margins in New Jersey are 19.3. In the majority minority districts, 52. And that's the same kind of pattern that follows in other states. So what that means is that you put all the minorities into one district, and then there are very few minorities in another. Now, Professor Rene Rocha of University of Iowa has calculated that creating majority minority districts actually aids to the election of Republicans in Congress. If instead of having 50% in each district, you had 40%, the minorities would be spread more broadly and Democrats would win more elections. Now, in 2025, the events are going crazy, and the technical word for what politicians are doing is chutzpah. Instead of waiting 10 years for a new census, states are redrawing districts they drew 4 years ago to gain more seats in Congress and a larger majority in their legislatures. Greg Abbott has convened a special session of the state legislature in Texas, drawn new districts. President Trump has said you can pick up 5 more seats. However, as we will see, the Republicans did not go the easiest routes, picking on Democrats that look most vulnerable. Instead, they appeared to select specific Democrats they did not like. And they made a bet that Latinos would continue supporting Trump and the Republicans. Stick with me on this. Okay, this is gerrymandering in North Texas. Okay? None of the elections in North Texas were even reasonably close. Okay, if you look, they're all, Republicans by 50, Republicans by, 50, Republicans by 51. There's one Republican by 18. But you see one Democrat by 22. So what they did was they removed Republicans from a whole bunch of these other districts so they could challenge Julie Johnson in District 32. That district went from 22 Democrat to 17 Republican. There's one thing I will just tell you. Besides giving Republicans an extra district, was it just completely an accident that they chose to remove Julie Johnson, the first openly lesbian member of Congress from a southern state? I'll let you decide that later. Now, this is Houston. The logical district to redistrict was Lizzie Fletcher's, which only the Democrats had only 18 percentage point win. But instead, they decided to go after Al Green, where his district was 48%. So they changed that district from 48% percentage points Democratic to 11 percentage points Republican. And then they shoved all, look at all the Democrats they shoved into vacant district number 18, making it 61% Democrats. They added a few Republicans to their closest districts, 22 and 28, and moved extra Republicans into Green's district to help. Now, in Central Texas, okay, the closest one would be in Central Texas would be Joaquin Castro at 29. But Castro was a pretty moderate guy. So they decided, instead of Castro, they were going to go after Greg Cesar. So what they did was they threw more Democrats into Castro, more Democrats into Doggett, and they switched from a 40% Republican to a 40% Democrat to a 7% Republican district. Last one. In the Rio Grande Valley, and this is where it's critical, Trump did very well. If you look at where it says baseline, that's the Congress. If you see baseline, the Democrats won 4, Republicans won 2, but Trump won 5 of the 6 congressional districts. Now, if you look, logic would have told you get rid of Henry Cuellar and Vicente Gonzalez, especially Cuellar because he only had an 8-point margin. And both Cuellar and Gonzalez are very moderate guys. But the Republicans decided they'd rather attack Gonzalez instead of Cuellar. So they built up Cuellar's district and they went after Gonzalez's district. I also want you to look at Monica de la Cruz at +2. And remember, the Republicans won 4 out of these 5 seats in the Rio Grande. Now, this seems like a good plan for Republicans, but here's a question. What happens if Latinos decide they don't like Republicans in 26 as much as they like Trump in 24? According to a recent article in Newsweek, Trump is facing sharp erosion of support among Hispanic voters. A Reuters survey showed he was 32% approval rating. In a YouGov Economist poll, 28% approved, 68% disapproved. SoCal Strategies shows his Hispanic disapproval surged from 36 to 52 from January to August. Now, here's a question. If Trump's decline among Latinos continues, Republicans could lose 4 districts around the Rio Grande and Cesar's district in the I-35 corridor, in which case the Democrats would end up with more seats than they started with. I'm just going back. Look at Monica de la Cruz. Look at Tony Gonzalez. Those two, if these are all mostly Hispanic districts, and they obviously represented by mostly Hispanics. If the Hispanics start to turn against Trump, all of these districts will not only not become Republican, but will become Democrat. So now Texas is not the only state working on redistricting. In Florida, DeSantis is talking about it. Indiana, Missouri have said that Missouri has already announced it's going to redistrict to eliminate one or both of its Democratic districts. And this could set off a cascade from 34 other states. If legislators are not happy with the results of a previous election, and a few members at a party win close elections, they could just, after every election, just redistrict. And the impact of this will be to further reduce competitive elections to allow the party in control to expand power and effectively destroy the concept of one person, one vote. Now, in response, the Democrats are vowing to eliminate nonpartisan commissions and return to gerrymandering. Governors in Illinois, New York, and California have already threatened to take up redistricting. Illinois, forget it. You got no chance. In a fundraising letter in August, Governor Gavin Newsom was ranting about Trump and, we're going to fight tooth and nail. We're not going to play by the same rules. This could be the start of a war in which states throw out the rules, eliminate nonpartisan commissions, and gerrymandering against the other party. And if this process gains momentum, our democracy will be permanently impaired. Now, there's only one problem with the Democrats' threat. It ain't going to work. Republicans currently have 219 seats to 212 for the Democrats. Republicans have trifectas in 23 states. Democrats have 15. Republicans in these states, Republicans have 221 electoral votes. Democrats have 193. Democrats have 42 Congress people in Republican states. Republicans have 29 in Democratic states. And some of the Democratic states have commissions, which means that you're going to have to eliminate those commissions before redistricting start, and some of the voters may not go along. So with the 7-seat disadvantage and 13 more seats at risk, plus the need to get voter approval to eliminate commissions, the numbers and the clock are both against the Democrats. Now, here is the interesting point. I believe mid-cycle gerrymandering could backfire. According to a recent YouGov poll, Americans overwhelmingly see gerrymandering as a major problem. 75% of Americans, including 83% of Democrats, 76% of independents, and even 66% of Republicans say it's a major problem. The Americans don't like gerrymandering. 67% of Americans want legislative districts that do not give an advantage to either party. Most Americans say it's unfair for a state to gerrymander its congressional districts, and more Americans want legislative districts drawn by an independent commission than by a state legislature. And even among Republicans, more want an independent commission. While gerrymandering helps the party in power, it's unpopular, and Americans think it's a major problem. Districts should be drawn by commissions, and states should not gerrymander House districts. Voters want competitive elections and more moderates who speak to them. Independents are increasing as a percentage of the voting population. They are against gerrymandering and in favor of independent commissions. We believe the actions of President Trump, Governor Abbott, and others will create a backlash that could turn people against the Republicans. We also believe Republicans in Texas could have miscalculated Hispanics. If the Democrats focus on a tit for tat, they will lose. Ending their own independent commissions is a path to failure, even if it might gain them a vote or two in the short term. However, Democrats now have an issue that has broad-based support. If they continue to fight against gerrymandering, they may have a real issue in coming elections that can significantly improve their favorability and their prospects. Now, Democrats have been underwater on immigration, crime, and the economy. The party has a low approval disapproval rating. Only 29% of independents approve of Democrats. They need an issue to gain more independents. And we believe independents are upset about these political games. For decades, gerrymandering has had a negative impact on our political system, and we think Republican overreach could provide the impetus for turning independents against Republicans and creating pressure for states to have districts joined by independent commissions instead of state legislatures. In addition, as I said earlier, there's a real possibility that some of Trump's policies may not work out as well as Republicans hope, especially with regard to the economy. If the economy is not thriving, fighting against gerrymandering could be a real issue in coming elections that could improve Democrats' favorability and process. We have to act now. When I originally wrote this presentation, I said people had time to act on the subject because the next redistricting cycle would not arise until 2032, after the 2030 census. Well, that's no longer the case. With all the noise about redistricting, people need to start acting now to stop gerrymandering. If they don't, competitive elections could virtually disappear. This is not just about Democrats or Republicans, it's about competitive elections. Citizens should speak out about the new threat from mid-decade redistricting. The actions in Texas and the promise of actions in other states will be disasters for our democracy. The disaster will be further enhanced if states like Illinois, California, New York, and others follow tit for tat. Gerrymandering is bad. Gerrymandering after every election will be a disaster. We need independent commissions, and we need gerrymandering only once every 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Very informative, Peter, as always.
If there are questions, please put them in the chat and we'll see if we can answer them. There is one question that has been in the chat for a while, and it's what's the likelihood that the Supreme Court will step in and decide that gerrymandering violates the Constitution and does something about it? This was from Ken Brasfield.
We're talking about a Supreme Court with Clarence Thomas and Alito and people like that.
What we got?
Yeah, I'm not concerned.
I think you answered my question, Peter. Well, I'm just wondering. Okay, just wondering and hoping.
And you can unmute yourselves as well.
Kelly Lane, you have your hand raised.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. That was a great presentation. We had a much shorter version of one of those in Scrutineers recently. Mike, I think, is on the call. But that was really great. And I'm just really glad to hear you say that. I'm a very strong independent and third party supporter. But I think you're absolutely right. It is, if you look at the polling, and I put some in the chat too, maybe you saw this, but an article from Independent Voter Network and recent polling in California from the Citron Center in Berkeley and Politico that said that like majority, 72% want to keep the independent commission. And I think you're absolutely right that it's a losing, what Gavin Newsom is proposing, I think is a really bad idea. I mean, just on principle, but also if the Democrats want to do better, yeah, they should be better on this issue. But great presentation. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Are there other questions, comments people would like to make?
Peter, what's the use of a woke citizenship against gerrymandering when the places that are most gerrymandered, and I live in Florida, are solidly electing the proponents to continue gerrymandering. Yes, if you're in the Hamptons, you'll probably find lots of folks who are against it, but those folks are not in Texas or Florida, and their faith leaders aren't saying it's a bad thing. So how, in other words, how does a minority, let's say African Americans, successfully obtain the vote? They have to have majority support. And the majority support doesn't seem to be in Missouri or Texas or Florida.
You know, it's interesting. You bring up African American. There was a redistricting in Florida. The Florida courts said there had to be a fair redistricting. So they came up with a reasonably fair redistricting. And then the Republican Party and a Black Democratic Congresswoman took the case to the Supreme Court because the Republicans wanted more districts and the Black Congresswoman wanted to keep her district. What I think we're seeing, and I think the really interesting trend is if you look at states, the number of independents, if you look at, say, people registering in the last 10 years, 60% in some states have registered as independents. The two parties are weakening significantly in many states. In states like Oregon, Connecticut, Nevada, others, independents are the largest voting group. And what we're going to be seeing, I believe, is independents joining with a party to start creating rules that are fairer. So, you know, when we talk about Florida, people forget that in 2018, which was 7 years ago, that DeSantis won the governorship by 32,000 votes against a left-wing Democrat. And if the Democrats had nominated the moderate that they should have, DeSantis would never have been elected. I see a lot of progress being made, and I think all these things are now especially among younger voters who are primarily independent. I see we're getting to a tipping point where all this is going to start happening.
So you're saying if you vote at the top, governor, then that may serve as a brake on all the gerrymandered legislators who want to be reelected and go to the trough.
But I'm also saying that what you're going to see happening, as you've seen in other states, is that a lot of these, you're going to see gerrymandering backfiring on people, and you're going to see elections, you're going to see people fed up with gerrymandering when all you have is the radicals from one side or another, and you're going to see more states pushing for independent commissions.
We have another question from Hamid Nabavi. What would you recommend citizens do to effectively oppose gerrymandering? Writing a letter to your congressman is not likely to be effective. Can this issue be a battle cry of a national student movement?
And the answer is that there's a couple of good answers, but one is that there are specific movements in specific states to change the system and also to change the voting system where you have top two primaries or things of that sort. So that what we really need to do is to start electing more moderates. So it's not, so everything is not we versus they, but there are serious movements going on in many states on this subject. And the second thing is that that I just hope that all the Democrats don't suddenly cave in and say, we got to be like Gavin Newsom. I mean, I showed you at the beginning of the presentation the maps of Illinois. Explain to me how Pritzker, who's on TV all the time talking about this, is going to find one more district. Just doesn't work.
We have Bob Roderberg has raised his hand.
Peter, speaking as your rabbi, I want to let you know that you have strong, very strong biblical support for this. Torah says about judges, they have to be not looking at the people who are coming in front of them for judgment. So they don't favor the rich or favor the poor. They don't unfavor the rich or the poor. So you have very, very strong, you're standing on very strong biblical ground here.
Well,
Keep going.
thank you. I went up before I wrote this. I went up. I was on this boat and the ship. We landed in Mount Ararat, and then I got off with all the animals.
Good for you.
Well, speaking of animals, and those people who raise them, but also raise the grain that the animals need, the farmers are unhappy with Trump. Any data on possible shifts in their sentiment?
What's, this is again something interesting. The farmers, I mean, obviously, you don't have to worry about, farmers in North Dakota. I mean, North Dakota is not, suddenly going to turn. But let's look at Missouri, which is redistricting. In the interest of time, I did not have time to show the Missouri map. But if you remember, Missouri's had plenty of Democrats, Stuart Symington, and recently a Democratic senator. And when you take all the minorities from St. Louis and Kansas City and you shove them into farm districts, which is what the governor is doing now, you better be pretty sure that those farmers are going to stay loyal to the Republicans. Because if they're not, and in most off-year elections, the party out of power loses. If they're not, then you could really start to see, if you go back and look at the Texas numbers, you're playing, the Texas numbers are playing, the game in Texas is real simple. Hispanics are going to keep supporting Republicans so we can screw around with these districts. In states like Missouri, they have to have the farmers or they're going to be out of luck.
We have another question. This is Kelly Lane makes the comment. I think we have to define moderates and radicals. That may be true, I'm not sure, but there's another question coming in from Barbara Wyckoff. How do we get the word out so more people understand? Is there any way to convince someone to do a podcast or something to light the fire, to build a bigger audience?
Well, I think having a podcast would be a good idea. And the really exciting thing, I really shouldn't tell anybody, but I will, is that I'm finishing a book on this subject, which will be finished on the entire election subject. But, So, but it's important for people to talk about these things. And I just want to go back to make this comment about moderates and progressives. The numbers I am most focused on is bipartisan and non-bipartisan. And what you have seen with gerrymandering is that anybody who is the least bit bipartisan has been gerrymandered out of their districts by one party or the other. And these are equal opportunity people. And the people who are the most, if you look at the list of the people who are the least bipartisan, okay, would anybody, I'm sorry, I just was pulling something up, but like to guess would anybody like to name 3 names of the least bipartisans in the current, name 2 of the least bipartisans in the current Congress?
Chip Roy,
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Okay, the two least bipartisan are Jim Jordan and AOC. Okay? Now, if I said to you, name any one of the top 20 most bipartisan, what would you, if you were trying to name one of the 20 most bipartisan, could you name any of them?
Do you just mean as a whole or on elections, just as a whole?
As governing in a bipartisan manner. Now,
So-
there's a Lugar Center that's founded by former Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana, measures how bipartisan each of these people has governed.
Seth Moulton.
I mean, nowhere near, what I'm saying is you'd be surprised.
Based on voting patterns?
What?
It's based on voting patterns in Congress?
Voting patterns in Congress, Richard, yeah. But the point is that to have a working government, you need people to work together. It can't, if we're, interestingly, 2 of the top 4 from the last Congress are in New York State, Mark Molinaro and Mike Lawler. But the point is this: if we're in a position where every party, where it's the only choices are lock down the government or declare a state of war, we don't have a functioning government.
Not lately, for sure.
That's what Trump wants.
Yeah.
so Mike Otten is asking which states have effective movements in right now going on to move perhaps towards the commission.
Well,
Approach.
right now, most states have effective movements to work against the commissions. So right now, the biggest risk in this election is not that states are going to move toward commissions. It's that states are going to, like New York, California, and a bunch of others, are going to move against commissions. And when you think of that, we still have 34 states where the politicians draw their own districts. I mean, and when you look at California and you look at the changes in California since they went to commissions, the numbers in terms of approval of the government by both parties are just astounding.
Dismal.
Very
Dismal.
Barbara,
If I may
you're saying
interject, Peter, I think the reason that Mike asked about which states have effective movements in the process was when I asked my question, you said that some states have some movements, and I think he wanted to know which states. So I would
And I have,
consider that as well.
Hamid, I have it's that's in the chapter in the book on gerrymandering, and I will get to that. Right now, I'm more concerned about the states that are moving against. I see no, in the current environment, I see no states moving. Here's the point. The states that are looking at commissions are looking at commissions for 2032. The states that are looking to get rid of commissions and the states looking to re-gerrymander are states that are looking at 2026. My major concern right now is stopping this nonsense for 2026.
I guess the question is, how do you stop them? Then one way would be your own earlier answer, that there are some movements towards opposing gerrymandering. So if you don't have an opposing party, how do you
Okay, and the and the good, that's a very good question, and the good answer is that people in states that are starting to gerrymander mid-cycle, whether it be Missouri or Florida, California, the voters in those states should start to say no. The point isn't to put, you're not going to have commission. There's two issues. There's issue number one, is gerrymandering good? No. Issue number two, should we be doing gerrymandering in mid-cycle or after every election? And that's absolutely not. Redistricting is necessary for population changes. But Governor DeSantis said, oh, yeah, we got to redistrict again because we've had such an influx of people. They haven't had that big an influx of people.
That's what the census is for.
That's what the census is for. But what I'm saying is Governor DeSantis decided that, oh, because we've had such an influx of people in the last couple of years, we should redistrict again. Well, hello, where are you going to get a census to decide where the people are?
But just to build on what you said, Peter, Kelly Lane shared in the chat that a brand new Citron Center, Berkeley Possibility Lab, independents opposed Newsom's plan by nearly a 3-to-1 margin. 72% want to keep the independent redistrict commission, which speaks to your last slide that if the Democrats could be more big tent as opposed to leadership, they have an issue that they could lead on.
Yeah, and the point that I'd like to make on that is that when you look at the population, at the voting population, what you find is that you're having more and more states I'm just going to throw an example out. In Nevada, between 2014 and 2024, the number of party registrants went from 74.3% to 58.4%. At the rate that's occurring in Nevada, the two parties will be a minority in the next 5 years. In Oregon, in the same period of time, Democrats went up by 23%, Republicans by 14%, independents and others by 265%. What you're starting to see is the rise in independents who are saying, we don't like the way the system is working. And they're getting to the tipping point in a lot of these states.
So that's a silent movement, I guess. That's good. That's a good observation. Yeah.
And what's interesting, Hamid, is so far the independents have voted in very low numbers. In Oregon and Nevada, where they're almost a majority, they have closed primaries. And the two parties keep playing the game as if they've got it handled. They're not going to have it handled. They're going to suddenly find out that that the sand has switched under their feet, and they're in quicksand.
Peter, in the near term, how do you deal with the Republicans in those states that are slanting the votes and essentially, manipulating it? You want to oppose it, but we can't wait 4, 5, 6 years to change things. What do we do in the short term?
Oh, yes, we can. And the reason we can is, as I explained in the great detail that I went over with Texas, is if Hispanics turn against the Republicans, as I believe they will, gerrymandering is going to slap the Republicans in the face, and they're going to end up with less districts than they started with.
Doesn't that depend on the opposing side, the Democrats being articulate, which they have not really been in the last few elections, which is why they've been really falling behind. They have not addressed the issues that many of the minorities and other people. You got to change the Democrats as well.
Well,
I don't think they've been really speaking articulately. And, what you've been speaking is articulate, but how do you get the Democrats to turn around?
Well, Democrats have to realize that the Democrats, if you look at any of the polling, the Democrats are off on a cloud, and you ask people what the Democrats stand for, and they'll tell you they stand for LGBT rights. They stand for, Democrats need Democrats need to change their act. But one of the things that I'm suggesting can benefit the Democrats is standing up against gerrymandering. I think that will win them votes.
People still vote their pocketbook. And what Trump has faked is the idea that he is good for people's pocketbooks. But everything he's done in the past year is anti-pocketbook.
Well, I'm not going to get in. We're a nonpartisan group. And this is, and I am not suggesting that Trump will succeed or fail. What I am suggesting is I believe the Democrats have to get back to pocketbook issues and democracy issues.
That's right.
I'm not going to take a side as to whether Trump is good or bad.
Well, but you're right. It's the pocketbook that really drives a lot of voters.
But where you have elections where everybody on both sides is winning 90% to 10%, there is a damage to our political system.
Mhm.
I want to thank everyone for participating this afternoon. I think this has been a very informative presentation. I want to thank Peter for all the work he has done. This has been extraordinary. It will be out on our website, Reform Elections Now, in the very near future, a copy of the presentation, so you can listen to it again if you want. You can also see the slides. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and please come back. We'll be having more conversations or more presentations in the very near future. We'll get our schedule put out to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter.
Peter.
Thank you. Thank you for being nonpartisan. Great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great seeing everybody.